I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up, then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest, Neil Weitzman, is a go-to-market operator, fractional CRO, advisor, and investor whose entire philosophy can be summed up in 3 words: get shit done. Neil founded Weitzman Go-to-Market to give founders and revenue leaders hands-on, execution-focused go-to-market guidance, not more slide decks and frameworks. Neil, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with your hosts, Gabe and Lexi. Neil, we just heard your bio. We are so excited you are here. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I am wonderful. I am excited to be here, and I am so appreciative to hang out with you, both you and Lexi, for a little while.
Yeah, it's going to be a good hang. And you wore black, and so thanks so much for being on brand here. We appreciate it. We're all in dress code.
I'm waiting. I mean, it's a black regular shirt. I don't see alley-oop on it, which would be wonderful. But aside from that, it's all black.
All right, we're going to have to buy one. Lexi, can you make that happen, please?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's start with your origin story because your bio is amazing, but let's really peel back the onion and hear why you got into this, how you got into this, right? Because it's always interesting, especially in go-to-market and in sales and in revenue. Very rarely have I yet to hear that someone said, yeah, I got a degree in sales from college and that's why I do this. So walk us through what really shaped your belief in getting into this industry and why are you passionate about it?
Yeah, without going back too far, I started my career from a real deep understanding of information and data. I kind of grew up in the data world, a company called Nielsen, and I worked at various analytics companies over the years. And I feel like that shaped me on how important data is in everything we do, especially, and maybe most importantly, sales and GTM marketing, but also in how to be curious, right? For me, all the data and analytics work I did in my career was all about what drove that, what got us to that metric, how did we get there? And so that played a big role, I think, in me getting deeper into sales and marketing. It was a data company and I ended up leading larger teams and running departments and so on. And then that just naturally graduated into, pure sales roles, pure revenue leadership roles. And then, without boring you with my whole career details, I'll jump right to the last 5 or 6 years, where I was a full-time CRO and then left the full-time world for the fractional GTM advisory type of world, which I'm sure we'll chat a little bit about, which has been the most fun and exciting and energetic part of my career. Even though I'm getting older, I absolutely love what I'm doing now and super excited about the path I'm on, and hopefully the value I help deliver to different companies.
That's awesome, and I'm excited to dive more into the fractional role, but you open with revenue is everything and nothing else matters. That's a bold statement. Make the case. Why revenue above all else? And how do you rebut when people push back and say, what about culture? What about product? What about brand?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, it's a bit of a tagline to get a reaction, but I do believe it deeply. It's not to say the things you mentioned, Lexi, are not important. Of course they are. And the value or the degree of each of these things being important varies on the type of company we're talking about. Clearly, not for profit charity, doing something to help humans, do XYZ, is a very different organization than a B2B SaaS or technology company, without a doubt. So it could vary. I'm not crazy to say that, it's black and white like that. That said, in the world I live in, um, revenue solves a lot of frickin' problems. It is 1,000 times easier to spend time on other problems in other areas when things are going well. Um, the minute your company is not doing well and you're behind, or you don't have a lot of runway left, or any number of revenue related situations, I don't think the CEO has a lot of appetite for, we need to improve the culture over here. That may be true, but that is not the focus. The focus is revenue. When things are going well, you're allowed a lot of runway and a lot of time to focus on the other things. And other things matter. Of course they do, right? I think we probably would all agree you can't have a company that's doing really, really well for a long period of time without a fantastic culture. That would be very strange. um, but you've got to start with, how are we growing the company? How are we getting the dollars in? It provides space and runway for all the other things that also matter. But without it, nothing else does matter. You got to focus on what's paying the bills and keeping the lights on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, obviously, my mentor actually said, Zig Ziglar, who I love, he used to always say, money's not the most important thing in the world, but it ranks right up there with oxygen, right? So
Exactly. It's a great analogy. It
it's a
is
great
exactly
analogy.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you say everything you're saying, which I'm spot on and believe 100%, is like, it just reminds me of that quote. So you
Yeah.
couldn't be more right.
I'm gonna use that quote. I like that. That's maybe a little less controversial than revenue is anything and nothing else matters.
No, be bold, be bold. I liked it. So I was trying to explain, because I was talking about, and I used the word fractional in a sentence over the kitchen or the dinner table at my mother's house for the holiday season recently. And she stopped me, and she's an English teacher. So she's like, what do you mean fractional? She had no idea, because she's not in this space of any kind, right? So I'm trying to explain it to her, and she's like, oh, it's kind of like a consultant or like an advisor. And I'm like, yeah, not really, because there's that execution piece, right? A consultant has ideas, they have processes, they have strategies, but fractional to me, and I'm going to ask you if I'm right or wrong, because this is my position. Fractional to me is all of that a consultant or an advisor brings to the table, but they're actually the one delivering on the execution piece. Where does that come from, and why is that role, the title fractional, so popular and trending these days?
Yeah. This is a very controversial topic, depending,
Right.
if you sit in seats like mine and yours, everyone's got a different opinion. And to be blunt, everyone's entitled to their opinion. There is no body out there that says fractional is exactly X and consultant is exactly Y. No one gets to decide that. But the world's a better place if there's some clarity of definition, because it does make it a little easier to build business, to have conversations, to know what you're looking for. If I'm a CEO and I need help, do I need a fractional CRO or do I need a sales consultant? And the problem is those things often overlap and blend depending on who you're talking to. So that's probably a simple way of saying, I'll give you my opinion, but there is no absolute right and wrong. But I'm a very opinionated person, as you know, so I'm pretty definitive on what I believe. Um, and I'll answer it by also saying it depends on stage of business to a large degree. But I usually work with early stage, small to mid-sized companies. Um, and for me, I'll define what a fractional versus a consultant versus an advisor would be. Um, and by the way, I heard a phrase the other day, which I really, really liked, which I'll come back to, but fractional CRO, similar to like an embedded GTM operator or an embedded CRO. Um, some people are starting to like that kind of terminology a little different. Um, and I'll explain why. So for me, exactly like you said, Gabe and Lexi, is advisor is pretty straightforward to me. Advice only, right? And the way I think about that is when I talk to a CEO, it's do you need my brain or do you need my brain and my hands? Right? Which is a nice way of kind of saying, well, I want your hands too. If it's brain only, it might be just an advisor type of situation, right? Advice only. We meet once a week or whatever the case may be. You ask questions, I give advice, I try to help you, point you in the right direction. Pretty straightforward, and that's been around for 100 years or what have you. Um, Consultant is what we usually all think about, and consultant usually has like that connotation that many of us don't love, and consultants have gotten bad names over the years, and sometimes those are the big four consulting companies, but consultants comes in all shapes and sizes. And those are usually, in my opinion, scope of work, right? You come in, I want to hire you to do X, Y, Z. I need it delivered within 30 days. And there you go, and you're done. You're not usually part of the team. You're not no one's reporting to you. You're not executing anything, but you're providing strategy, recommendation, some kind of deliverable, and you do that scope of work. Some consultants are fantastic, some are not, just like any job, like any role. Fractional or embedded person, to me is so very similar to what you said, Gabe. And for me, it's like for a 3-month or a 6-month engagement where I'm essentially the same as a full-time in-seat chief revenue officer, but I am only doing it on a fractional basis, whether that's 1 day a week or 2 day a week. And of course, some people may say, well, how can you ever do that? It's a full-time job. The answer is it's a full-time job for some companies at certain stages. When they're big enough, it definitely should be a full-time job. But if Gabe and Lexi started a company tomorrow and you only had 2 salespeople, would you hire a really expensive person who's a CRO who's been there and done that right away? No. You might want their experience and their advice and their support in different ways a day a week, but you're definitely not going to pay them, $500,000-$600,000 a year for a company that is at a certain stage. And so that's what fractional CRO is all about. And that could be a CMO too, but for a fractional CRO, that's exactly what it is. It's doing the job of a regular CRO, but you're doing it on a 1 or 2, whatever it may be, basis. And a lot of people will debate this till they're blue in the face, which is why I started with early stage companies at a certain stage make really good sense.
Absolutely. And I really like the definition and also how you mentioned that everyone has their own opinions on what fractional means, similarly to how go to market means different things to different people. What's your specific definition of go to market execution and what does it actually look like when a company gets it right versus when they're fumbling it?
Two good questions, very different. All right, let's split those apart. So what's the definition of go to market? So um, to your point, lots of people define different. A lot of people think go to market equals sales. Some say sales, marketing, customer success. Depends on, again, what your seat you're at. Same thing as CRO, right? Some people define that differently. For me, the true definition of CRO is sales, marketing, and customer success. Owns that all, anything to do that drives revenue. And all 3 of those have a big impact on revenue, not just one. GTM to me is the same thing. Anything that touches your go-to-market process. So if there was such a thing, and of course there is, as a SVP of GTM, what would they own? Or what's included in the go-to-market process? It is all of those things. It's how you prospect, how you sell, what you say, what your messaging is, how you behave, what is your brand all about? What do you stand for? It's all of that. And that's a lot of stuff, which is why this is very, very hard, right? If we just say, what's your sales process? That's, a small piece of the overall go to market. Go to market is a much more comprehensive idea of all the things that we are doing to build our brand, represent ourselves, have the opportunity to talk to people, have discussions, close deals, all of it. And so it's probably a long way of saying it's a hell of a lot, Lexi. But I don't think there's a simple like, oh, it's just sales and marketing. It's more than that. It's all of it. Um, the second part of your question, Lexi, was what? Sorry, remind me.
What does it actually look like when a company gets it
Right.
right versus when they're fumbling it?
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious when you see it, right? So again, I'm data driven. I know you folks are data driven over at Alley-Oop. So it's let's look at the data and let's see what's going on. Are we having the right types of conversations? How often are we having them? What are we learning? At what rate are they converting from a conversation to a sales qualified lead or whatever you might call it? How many of those are converting through? What's the average sales cycle? So for me, understanding if it's working or not, again, is very different company by company. Because what my company might do on all those metrics might be really good for me, but terrible for you. So it's all very, very different. So understanding your process, your data, your funnel, your conversion rates, that's how we understand, is it working or is it not? The whole idea of, my win rate must be 25% because that's what the benchmark is. Well, that's bullshit. You might have an incredibly successful, amazing business with a win rate of 15%. It depends on many factors. So, we got to be careful worrying about benchmarks and quote unquote best practices. We've got to look at our own business, understand if it's, driving the business that we want and the revenue we want, and then just continually improve from there without worrying so much about what's, you know, other companies are doing X, so we must be doing terrible.
So let's talk about it. So you jump in, right? You're
Yeah.
at a company, you're a fractional CRO. Now everyone knows what that is. They know go to market, they know CRO. You talk about this a lot, and I love this. It's 100% say do ratio, right? Having that say do ratio at 100%. In GTM context, right? Where is that often breaking down, and why do you think that discipline may not be, there within the company when you step into it?
Yeah. So for me, I forget where I learned the analogy of the say-do ratio, but I heard it years and years and years ago, and I've always it's just resonated with me. And of course, the idea of that, it's about execution. It's about sticking to your promises. It's about, making a commitment and staying true to that. That could be customer focused. It could be to your boss. It could be to your colleague. It doesn't matter. Our brand and our name, whether it's us personally or our company, is everything. And we can do a whole nother show on just how important that comment is, in my opinion. But if I say to Lexi, I'm going to have you something by Friday, I don't care if it's an important something or who gives a shit what it is. If I tell her that, she has every right to expect I'm going to stick to my word. And if I don't, even if it's not important, the minute I don't, Lexi has lost trust. Now, she may give me a break on that and not worry too much about it, or she may not. But I've lost trust, and she's never going to trust me again, not to the same degree. Now, obviously, if it's a very important topic, then that's even a bigger issue. But if I just communicate with Lexi and say, Lexi, I know I promised you for Friday that I was going to have X to you. Something came up, shit happens. I'm really sorry. Is it okay if I get that to you for Monday? 99% chance Lexi is going to say, of course it is, especially if it's not important. And I've kept my trust, and I've shown her that I know how to communicate. So that's what say do is ratio is just all about. It's about if I put up my hand and say I'm going to do something, that I fucking do it, right? And if I can't do it, I communicate clearly. That's the number one thing that I think we all need to remember whether we're selling and we have a customer meeting, whether it's a follow-up to a meeting where I say, Gabe, I don't know the answer to your wonderful question, but I promise you I'm going to follow up by end of day. And then I don't, same thing, right? So whatever I say, I'm going to just do. Customer, internal, boss especially, right? All you folks out there beginning your careers, right? You tell your boss you're going to get back to them or respond to them or even get back on an email and you don't, please know your boss has just lost trust and he or she is not going to forget that ever. They're not going to forget. They're going to remember that. So it's super, super important. I just think the GTM bar is quite low. And maybe I'm a little pessimistic on this, but I think if we all think about the sales process as an example, and all the times, probably this week you can think about it, where someone said, yeah, I'll get back to you with that quote tomorrow or whatever the case may be, and then they don't. It just happens so often. Lack of follow-up, lack of commitment, no sense of urgency. You know, you're interested in a product and they take 2 weeks to get back to you and you like all this happens constantly. The GTM bar is low, in my opinion, which is a good thing for those of us who get it. Cause it's, you know, if the bar's low, then those of us who get it can look great really easily by executing, by sticking to your say-do ratio, and by having a sense of urgency and responsiveness. I don't even care what your product is, within reason, of course. If you can do these things right, you have a huge advantage over everyone else, even if they have a better product.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think the most common go-to-market mistake you see, even if it seems like a well-funded, running well company? What mistake do you think is most common right now?
That's a good question. I'm going to go back to data. I still see majority of companies not doing a good job of understanding truly what good looks like. You know, and I don't know if Kevin, I don't know if you guys know Kevin Dorsey. I don't know if Dorsey invented the terminology wiggle or not, but I give him credit for it. So wiggle, what good looks like, is a really easy way of understanding, do you know your business? Do you understand what's working and what's not? And that all comes from the data. It's not opinion. It's not because Gabe says so-and-so on his team. Gabe really loves the style of so-and-so's cold calling ability. It doesn't matter what Gabe thinks. What matters is what are the numbers say? What's the effectiveness? What are we seeing? Do we truly understand what good looks like? Because if we don't, we can't keep getting better and better. Whether that's from a cold calling, from a messaging, from a subject line, from a how do we do discovery properly, you name it, right? All the way through the process, we need to understand what good looks like. And we have to use that again and again. We need to demonstrate it. We need to coach our teams on it. You can also do the opposite. We understand what good doesn't look like. Here's an example of that. Not to make fun of anyone, of course, but showing people that this is not what we want to do, right? So that is the number one mistake, I think, Lexi, is I don't feel like we or most companies have a great baked understanding across their process of what good looks like. And again, that comes from understanding your business and your data. They have limp pieces of it. Lots of companies have a playbook, but in that playbook, if you go and look and say, okay, here's what a great cold call, for example, looks like. Here's what it sounds like. Here's what we do. That's rarely documented and rarely communicated very well.
That's amazing. So I hired a consultant many years ago and I said, I can't wait to get you started. And he's like, yes. And I can't wait for you to fire me. And that was his response. And I said, wait, what? And it took me off guard for a second. And he's like, you listen, if I don't get fired in a year, I didn't do my job well. Right. And the whole point of a consultant is to make an impact. So they don't have a role, you know what I mean? And they don't need that advice, or the company doesn't need their expertise at all. So what does that look like in the fractional model? Because it's blowing up right now, right? At every level. You said CMO, obviously CRO, but there's so many fractional executives across the board, fractional, CFOs and whatnot. So my question is, when does it make sense? What's the tipping point of when it makes sense to
Yeah.
bring someone in-house full time? Because you were mentioning full time, at a different stages in the business. Is that clearly defined in your world?
In the CRO world, it is more clearly defined. So,
Yeah.
a different, 2 examples. If there is a small to medium-sized business that's a mature company that's been around for 20 years, let's pretend it's an accounting firm. An accounting firm might need probably, a fractional CTO, right? And based on the size of the company, they never need a full-time one. They've been around 20 years. Are they going to triple in size next year? Probably not. It's possible, but maybe that's not even the goal or the ambition of the owner. So in that example, again, everyone generalizes, but the example matters. In that example, a fractional CTO might live in that company for a day a week forever, right? Because that's all they ever need. They just need a little bit of technical support for their accounting firm. Unless they triple in size, there's no job there for a full-time person. And so that's very possible. And there's lots of examples of fractional people in certain functions not having to put themselves out of a job and living in that company for a long, long, long time. In the CRO and the CMO world, I believe it's less likely because most of the time, those types of situations still could happen. Of course it can. But the world I live in and the world you live in, Gabe and Lexi, is more about companies that are trying to build, grow, scale, eventually, etc. And in that world, then yes, agree. And I say the same thing, Gabe. Whoever that was that told you that, I agree with. If you were interviewing me, Gabe, I would say the same thing. I'd say, yes, I believe I can help you. And my job is to put myself out of a job. And so whether that's in 3 months or 6 months, my goal is to help you build a go-to-market process and a foundation and all the things you need to be successful so that you feel good and comfortable at the right time to say, now I should invest in a full-time CRO because now all the foundation is built. We know what good looks like. We're rocking and rolling. I'm feeling good on where we are. I'm comfortable now spending that amount of money to hire a full-time CRO because that CRO can now walk in and deliver a value and revenue and not spend 9 months fixing shit and building things. And that is my job. And I've done that a few times, and I say the same thing to my clients or my prospects. So I love that, and I believe that's true for the world I live in.
Right.
In your world, what does the engagement actually look like day to day? How do you avoid just becoming another advisor with a live document and a Slack channel?
I love that. So in every function, there's people that are great at their job and people who aren't so great. And I hope and like to think I'm a good one. I do okay, and I'm very excited about what I do. And to me, Lexi, I think the answer to that, without it making it sound too simplistic, is it's about me. It's about the person, right? It's who are you? How do you approach business? How passionate and dedicated are you? And it comes back to the definition. So for me, you know, I will say, Lexi, if you are my prospect, I would say to you, let's talk about the differences of what you're looking for. If you're looking for advisory only, here's what that looks like, and here's what I'm going to do for you, and here's what I'm not going to do for you. If you're looking for getting my hands dirty, true CRO, let me explain what I'm going to do for you. And if you pick that option, and if that option's the right fit, then now it's my job to stick to my, product, my delivery, and make sure I follow through on what I've promised you, of course, and what we've contracted. And sure, there's CROs or whatever job that don't do that well. Of course, that's true. But for me, it's easy. And I don't mean the work is easy. It's very hard, but it's easy because it's just who I am, right? I'm kind of like at times over invested, over dedicated, over passionate. You might get that sense. And so I'm all over, like, whatever client I sign up with, they do feel like I am their full-time CRO and I'm always on with them and I'm always available to them. And that's just who I am. So for me, Lexi, it just becomes natural because it's what I love to do and it's who I am. But obviously it might vary by person on what their approach is to, what we just said and how they're defining the work.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about founders, right?
Okay.
Because you have different types of founders. I would say, the Steve and Steve, right? Let's talk about Apple for a second. You got Jobs and Wozniak. You got those Wozniaks where like they're the developer. They're the one that actually created the product. They're the product guy, and that's the founder of the company. Then you got your sales guys or your visionaries, the people who can sell anything, and that's your founder. Or then you got your finance guy, and they're the ones with all the money, and now that's your founder. And so you have all these different types of personality types when you're coming in and you're talking about the go-to-market strategy. A lot of founders are very invested into it already, right? They're in the weeds with their go-to-market, and you have to have tough conversations. You got to tell them, hey, listen, their approach isn't working. So, how do you manage those different types of founders in especially in go-to-market, and advising them without offending them?
I might start with where you ended there and the part about offending them. I mean, I probably do offend them.
Exactly. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. I probably,
How to be straight. I love it. No, this is it. This is great.
I probably do, but I don't try to offend anyone, obviously. But another way of saying that is I tell the truth, and
Yes.
I tell the truth whether they want to hear it or not, and I do it out of love. The same way, Gabe and Lexi, that I'm sure your staff, when you give them feedback, if it's tough feedback that they need to hear, I'm sure you do it anyway, because that's the only way they're going to get better.
Right.
Blowing smoke doesn't help anybody. And I do that and I say that up front, Gabe. So that's about fit. Again, Lexi, let's pretend you're my prospect and we're trying to see if we should work together and you're going to hire me and pay me millions of dollars. I don't get paid millions. I'm just kidding, but let's pretend in this case. We'll have that discussion, right? Especially if I get the sense that maybe you're stuck in your ways, Lexi, potentially. I don't know, but that's easy to see through conversation. But no matter what, I'll always have a moment where I say, okay, let's take a pause for a second on the delivery. It only makes sense for you to pay me, Lexi, and hire me if you're actually willing to change and want to change and willing to listen. So I don't want to take your money if I'm just going to do a lot of work and nothing's going to change and no impact's going to be made. There's no point, because I'm going to look bad later too, because I won't be able to use you as any kind of reference or referral. And so it's really about fit. So I'll have a real discussion and I'll say, Lexi, do you want me to tell you if I think something sucks? Do you want me to tell you that you need to get rid of certain people? Do you want me to tell you if I think you've done something wrong? And I'll have that discussion and I'll be really blunt about it. And here's the trick, I think, or not the trick, but the catch 22. They almost always say, yes, please. They almost always say the right thing, but it doesn't always happen. Of course, right? So X percent of clients who I thought would work and have a good fit. Sometimes CEOs, as we know, or founders, especially if they were with the company from the beginning or started the company, sometimes they're stuck in their ways and they think they're right even when they're not. And I'm not perfect. I do my best to try to give my honest and blunt truth and give them the right advice and recommendations. And I'll say things like, Gabe, all you need to do is say yes, and I will make it happen and execute for you. And sometimes I can't get them to say the word yes because they're stuck in their ways. So I don't win them all, that's for sure. But no one could ever fault me for not telling the truth and being honest about what I see and doing the best I can on that regard. And sometimes I win. More times than not, I do win. And I don't mean win the argument. I mean able to make a difference. And sometimes it doesn't work, of course. And a lot of that's based on people's personality and willingness to be open and change more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been able to build a great partnership together. How do you build your partner relationships, and what makes you decide on working with someone?
Wow. I guess two things. People first. So it starts, well, I guess, yeah, two things. I was trying to think about how I came to know you guys in the first place. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember from Scott, if I remember correctly, was how I heard your name the very first time. So that lent a sense of trust, right? Where it came from a source that I trust. But then was with Gabe and I chatting, right? Then it was, does Gabe like me? Do I like Gabe? Do we get along? Gabe could work with lots of people. I could work with lots of people. Lexi, you have lots of choices on who you want to work with. I only want to work with people that I enjoy having fun with, joking around, being serious when we need to be, but being human. Like, life is effing short, right? Like, let's have fun while we do this. And so for me, it's that first. Okay. Meaning I'll partner with someone, even if their business and product isn't fantastic, if I believe in them and what they're trying to do and I enjoy them and I want to support their journey, then there could still be a way to help each other, right? Lots of companies have imperfect products, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve to have great partners and to try to help each other grow. So first and foremost, it's the people that we believe in and we want to support. The second, of course, is, do I believe in the service or the product or the business itself? Obviously, it can't be terrible, because I would never put my name against something bad in any way, shape, or form. But again, it doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10. It just has to be something that I can look anyone in the eyes and be passionate about and say, yes, I believe Alley Oop in this case does great work. I believe they're great people, and I believe they're going to do everything they can to help you. And if I can say that truly in my heart, then I think I could, partner with somebody on that. But so it has to be obviously good enough business where I can say that, but it starts with the people, and then secondary is the product, which has to be good enough. Obviously, a 10 out of 10 is even better, but it could be a 9 or an 8. It just can't be a 5 or a 4, obviously.
I love it. So before I ask you the last question, which is, how do people get a hold of you? I want you to give them some nuggets first. So if a founder who's listening came to you tomorrow and said, Neil, I got 6 months of runway, and I need to get my GTM working, it's not working, what would be those first 3 discovery questions or things you would tell them or find out from them, so they can take action on that right away?
Wow. Yeah, I like how you said the questions you'd ask them, because I think that's what I'd start with, is wanting to ask them a whole series of questions to understand. I think too many people jump to advice and answers. And again, even in this conversation alone, there's a million ways to define something or the way we think of something. So yes, I would start with a whole bunch of analysis or discovery questions to say, I may be able to help you, Gabe. And I'm passionate and I'm pretty good at what I do, so I'm confident I probably can help you. But first, we need to understand what the actual problem is, right? It's easy to jump right to solutions, but what's the actual problem? And I'd ask a bunch of questions like, do we have data that helps us understand, what good looks like? Show me everything you have around understanding your go-to-market process, your funnel, your conversion points, your close rates, etc. I'd also ask them maybe the most obvious question, which is, what do we need to do to get out of the 6-month problem hole, right? Do we need 3 new clients, or do we need 300 new clients, right? The way we might solve for that are also very, very different, right? 3 new clients, Gabe, Lexi, and Neil might be able to get you tomorrow with a bunch of connections we have. Don't know. But 300 is a whole different challenge. So what are we trying to achieve to solve the problem? Of course, starts there, and then understanding the right approach to that. So I probably don't have, some, magical button that I can press. So I don't have some magical button that I can press, and I don't have 3 magic answers for you, Gabe, on here's exactly what they should do, but I think good salespeople is probably a better way to say it. Never jump to here's what you need. They start with being curious and saying, help me understand what the problem is, where the pain is, what your goals are, what you're trying to get to. Let's analyze your current state. And then once we do all that, we probably can find some things to focus on to change the dynamic and put you in a better position. And that's all focus for me. I think that's the biggest thing is so many companies are trying to do, we all talk about focus, but believe me, and I work with a lot of different companies. One of the biggest problems is still like shiny object syndrome, where CEOs or anyone is like, let's do this, let's do this, let's try this, let's try this. And they got 76 things going on and none of them are going really, really well, as opposed to we're going to build and crush these 3 scenarios. And then once we do that and we get them built and running in a proper way, then we'll go tackle number 4 and number 5. That's still the biggest thing. And often when companies are not doing well, I think it ends up being that type of scenario where they're trying to do too many things at once.
Focus. That's the word.
Yeah.
Focus, then repeat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was amazing, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, our partnership. And just so everyone knows before you hear where to get in contact with Neil, we do have an amazing partnership like Lexi was just chatting about. And, you're the best of the best. And so when we have a client that comes to us and when you bring them to us and say, hey, they need some execution on the sales development side, we just literally say, okay, you tell us how high to jump because we know that they're getting the right, advice, the right work ethic, the right, do what you say you're going to do, commitment from you to them as that fractional CRO. So we appreciate, our collaboration, our partnership, and you're the best of the best. So how do people get a hold of you, man? What's the best way to reach out to Neil?
You are way too kind for saying all those things. No one's ever called me the best of the best. Maybe pretty good at times, but the best of the best is making me blush. I'm a LinkedIn guy, as Gabe and Lexi, you both are. By the way, anyone not following Lexi should be, of course. I think she's making Gabe and I look terrible.
Totally.
But yes, I'm a LinkedIn person. So anyone who's a stranger to me who wants to connect with me, LinkedIn's probably the best place, to connect. I could tell you go to my website, which by the way is weitzmangtm.com, and send me a contact form if anyone does that sort of thing anymore. Then of course you can do that. Otherwise, LinkedIn is always in our B2B world probably the most obvious and simple place to connect with me if you want, and I'd appreciate it and love talking to new people and meeting new people.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. Reach out to Neil. We appreciate you, man. And keep doing the hard things, everybody. And Lexi and I will see you on the next one.